It's important to distinguish the different eras of gravel mining on the Russian River. Dredging, from 1940 to about 1965, deepened the river greatly and straightened it. These were huge amounts of volumes of gravel taken out versus what was coming in. But later on, enough sediment did come in to partially refill the channel. And at that time, gravel extraction and bar skimming kind of kept up with the amount of sediment coming in. It was in balance. And for a long time, the channel was maintained. Ground photographs from the 1800s show a wide, shallow channel of the Russian River near Healdsburg. The upper left photograph, taken in 1872, shows a wide bar where the Sire plant exists today. In 1892, the diagram on the right shows gravel bars emerging from the channel and low floodplain benches alongside. The lower diagram, drawn in 1876, looks northward toward Fitch Mountain and shows the Russian River tributaries and the areas under land use that were subject to flooding about once every 10 years. The next set of slides show diagrams representing the Russian River during different eras. The first era, the historic era, occurred prior to 1850 and showed the original river before development. During this period of time, the channel was shallow, it had a wide active floodplain that flooded about once every 5 years, with devastating floods about once every 10 years on average. Land use and farming along the active floodplain was subject to flooding, damage, and destruction due to the channel meandering across the shallow floodplain. The next era started in 1940 with the dredging from Healdsburg down to Wohler Bridge. This took about 25 years to complete. During this time, the channel was lowered about 30 to 40 feet, but it subsequently refilled later. But you can see by the diagram how much deeper and narrower the channel was compared to the historic era. This deepened banks, deepened the channel, increased flood protection for the properties along the river. After deep dredging was done in 1965, the bar skimming era began. During this period, the river partially refilled itself from the dredging era, shown at the bottom, between that and the historic era shown at the top. Gravel bars were skimmed 1 foot above low water. The entire bar was removed. This helped to maintain the bars as low alternate bars and also controlled vegetation, which can further reduce flood capacity. During this time, floods were generally well controlled. After the bar skimming era, which ended in the late 1980s, the notch in-channel mining era began, and alternate bars began to build. They began to increase in height due to sediment deposition, as well as vegetation development, which encroached into the channel and further reduced channel capacity. Vegetation and sediment deposition kind of worked hand in hand, and soon much of the historic era channel was being recovered. This diagram shows the rates of gravel mining from 1946 to 2006. As you can see, the rates of mining were rather extreme up until about 1964. It peaked about 2 million tons per year during the early 60s. Later, after that, bar skimming only took out about 250,000 tons per year, as sources shifted from the channel to digging large pits in the floodplain. There was no continuous mining in the Middle Reach after 1989, and a little bit in 2000. From 1987 into the 2000s, the channel filled, and this area near the confluence of Dry Creek downstream from Healdsburg shows bars 8 and 9. Bar 8 has graded during this period more than 20 feet and includes dense vegetation. Bar 9 came up 14 to 16 feet, became a point bar, and started eroding the opposite bank. These changes drastically changed the behavior of the river. It had less flood capacity and less ability to transport sediment. This diagram shows a cross-section through bar 8. In 2002, most of the bar was skimmed down to about water level. It was very flat. The blue line representing 2002 shows the effects of gravel deposition through the 1990s. Up to 25 feet had been deposited, and about 3/4 of the cross-sectional area had been removed for flood conveyance. This greatly reduces the ability of the river to carry floods, thus floods are higher, and also reduces the ability to carry sediment, so deposition increases. It's important to understand these changes in terms of the processes the river was trying to convert itself back to a former wide, shallow channel from the deep, narrow one that was artificially dredged. This shows an area in 1898 around Dry Creek, which shows an island, and the river channel has got the tight lines. You can see all the properties nearby are agricultural lands. So this is a time when the river was wide and shallow, and The following sequence will show what's happened through the different eras.